Hello everyone. Today we're going to learn about the 5 criteria by which we evaluate a test. So how do you know if a test is effective? Or how do you know that your test that you're creating is good to be administered to your students? So these criteria by which we evaluate the test are 5 criteria with practicality, reliability, validity, authenticity, and washback. So practicality means that the test should be done or should take into account the time in which it will be answered. For example, if I'm teaching my students past tense or simple present and I want to administer the test should be, for example, 5 questions. Okay, it would be talking about 5 questions or 5 sentences, and the students should answer these 5 questions, for example, in 1 hour or something like that. So we cannot, for example, administer a test that requires 4 hours and we ask our students to answer that very test just in 1 hour. So if the test is something like this, so it's not a practical test. So the test should take into account the period in which it will be answered, the period of time. So a practical test is the test that takes into account the time in which it will be answered. And then we have reliability. What do we mean by reliability? Simply, reliability means that the test should be a test that is reliable, in the sense that if we give that test to the same student in different periods of time, for example, if we give a test to a student today and then they get 15 in the test, and tomorrow we give them the same test, so they should get 15 or a higher mark than 15. For example, if we give them a test and then they get 15 and we give them the same test tomorrow, but they get, for example, 9 or 5, so this test is not reliable because the score is different. I think that this point is clear. And then we're moving to validity. What do we mean by validity? So a test that is valid is a test that is measuring what it's supposed to measure. For example, if I'm teaching prepositions and articles, I should test my students on this, on articles and prepositions. So for example, if I'm teaching this, articles and prepositions, then I test my students on something that is different, then the test is not valid. So this is called validity or content validity. And then we have authenticity. What do we mean by authenticity? Authenticity simply means that the sentences which we are using in our test should be realistic, should be contextualized. For example, if you're teaching your students the past tense or simple present or the future, you should not, for example, write sentences or come up with sentences that talk about science fiction or sentences that talk about something that is far-fetched, something that is not realistic. For example, you're talking about gravity or you're talking about science or something like that in general. So you should try to find something that is realistic, something that we have in our life, something that we deal with every day, something that makes students feel that what they're studying is real, something that they can identify themselves with, something that is related to their daily lives. And then we have the last component, or the 5th component, is washback. So washback simply again means that the test should affect your teaching and your teaching should affect your test. How? So if you're testing your students on what they learned, so you should try to spot the weaknesses of your students. For example, if I taught them past tense and then I give them a test, I administer a test, and I realize that the majority of my students still find it difficult to understand the structure of the past tense. So when I teach them after the exam, I need to take into account this, and I have to give remedial work, and I need to come up with certain ways to make my students overcome the difficulty that they face in the past tense. So this is what we mean, or that is what we mean by washback. Okay, so this is great especially for you, Mr.